Hello and welcome. You're watching In Your Interest. I am Shweta Kothari. The GST Council Meeting, 54th GST Council Meeting has just concluded. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman on Monday, which is today, chaired the 54th meeting of the GST Council, and this comprises, remember, of state ministers, and it just finished. It's just over, we are told, and a press conference is likely to start anytime soon. The GST Council is expected to deliberate and has in fact deliberated on a host of issues, including taxation of insurance premium, the group of ministers' suggestion on tax rate rationalization, and a status report on online gaming. Sources say the fitment committee comprising centre and state tax officials have presented a report on GST levied on life and health insurance premium and the revenue implication. On the GST rate rationalization, the group of ministers have resisted so far changing the 4-tier GST slab rate, which is the 5%, 12%, 18% and 28%, but has directed the fitment committee to review the scope for rationalization. Whether any change has been made or announcement will be made, we'll get to know very, very shortly. But remember, the GST Council has also discussed a status report comparing the GST revenue collected through online gaming before and after 1st of October 2023, which is when the new rules kicked into place. Now, prior to the date, most of the online gaming companies did not really pay GST and argued for differential tax rates for games of varied skills versus chance. So, game of skills versus games of chances. Now, those were, of course, some of the key areas that are likely to have been discussed. The meeting is just over. Present in the meeting were the Union Minister of State for Finance, Pankaj Chaudhary, Chief Ministers of Goa, Meghalaya, Deputy Chief Ministers of Arunachal Pradesh, Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, Telangana, besides, of course, the Finance Ministers of States and UTs. Senior officials from Union Government and states also attended the meeting. Now, as I mentioned, the key area of discussion is expected to be around taxation on insurance premium. Now, the group of ministers suggested a rate rationalization on insurance premium, whether that rate rationalization will happen or insurance premium will continue to be taxed at 18%. We'll get to know that very, very shortly. But that was, of course, one of the key areas that GST Council discussed on. The GST Council was to discuss the burden of health insurance and that of exemption, if an exemption can be made for special cases such as senior citizens, or whether the 18% GST should go away completely. Well, if a decision has been taken, we'll get to know that. There was, of course, a deliberation with regards to goods and services tax on life insurance premiums as well. Now, currently, in 23-24, the centre and state collected about 8,262 crore rupees through GST on health insurance premium, while 1,484,000 crore rupees were collected on account of GST on health reinsurance premium. Now, if the 18% GST is to go away completely, the government will have to forego this revenue. But if the GST stays and if there is some special exempt categories made available, there could just be some tinkering with respect to that revenue that comes by the way of both health insurance as well as life insurance. Now, the insurance on taxation on premiums also figured, remember, in parliamentary discussions, and after parliamentary discussions, opposition members demanded that health and life insurance premium be exempted from GST. We also know that Road Transport Minister Nitin Gadkari wrote a letter to Finance Minister asking health and life insurance premium be exempted from GST completely. Whether a decision will be made with respect to that, we don't know, but government, of course, expected to take that very, very seriously. A conversation happened, and my colleague Krishna Kumar joining us here in the studio. A conversation really happened on GST like no time before. Was, of course, Krishna, on whether you and I, people who have to pay our premiums for our health and life insurance, should pay an exorbitant 18% GST or not. And perhaps GST Council today will clarify on whether it has accepted recommendations of the group of councils, whether it will exempt that 18% GST or will perhaps, make some sort of differential categorization.
Some relief
for elderlies perhaps, or for individuals like you and me.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the biggest issues facing the 54th GST Council meeting, and one, because it affects a very important industry in this country, that's the insurance industry, penetration of which is still nowhere close to where it should ideally be. So the decision that this GST Council meeting will take on insurance premiums, the taxation on insurance premiums, health and life insurance premiums, will go a long way in helping people decide whether to invest in insurance or not. Because at the rate at which they're being taxed, it is not attractive. It is not attractive enough. If you want more people to buy insurance products, if you want more people in this country to be insured, then you have to make the insurance as a financial product attractive enough to invest, at least not exorbitantly taxed, reasonably taxed. So any reduction from the current 18% will be appreciated. Of course, a complete exemption would be an absolute dream for the insurance sector and for those looking to invest in insurance products. So this is definitely one of those headline items as far as this particular GST Council meeting is concerned.
And another headline item will also be the taxation on online gaming companies.
Right.
Now, we remember that prior to 1st of October 2023, online gaming companies had to pay differential taxes on games of chance versus games of skills. Now, that was brought under one ambit, which is the ambit of 28% tax slab. That did not make online gaming companies very happy, and they had to pay up. And some of them, and most of them in this case, were faced with those notices to pay a huge amount of GST taxes and in revenues that they did not think of, that they did not dream of, and they happened to challenge it in court.
Right, but then they were faced with the eternal dilemma. Are they games of chance or games of skill? That's where the entire debate lies. And also the question of morality. This is an industry that's that is at its sunrise stage at this point in time. It will grow multifold in the coming years, provided you sort of take a call on how to regulate it in terms of taxation in the country. At the rate at which it is taxed right now, online gaming companies are going to find it extremely difficult to be profitable, to start with,
right,
and then
absolutely.
leave alone expanding.
Absolutely. Let's take that question from Shivam Mehta, Executive Partner, Laxmikumaran and Sridharan. Shivam, I think first question first, and since we're discussing this, online gaming companies, some of which have faced heavy tax notices to pay up GST amounting to thousands of crores of rupees, far greater than their annual revenue, will perhaps get to know today for a fact on whether GST Council is going to relook at it or not. But what we know so far, Council was clear last time around as well that 28% GST tax rate will stay.
That's right. So I think the news is, at least what I'm seeing from the media reports, is that for this online gaming, there is no relief whatsoever in the meeting. They have deferred the decision. The demand of online gaming was to, if not give a relief for what they have done in October 23, but at least give relief for the past period for which the matter is pending before Supreme Court. Because as your colleague was mentioning correctly, that the dispute is on whether it is a game of skill or game of chance. And they have made the amendments from October 23 onwards to take care of that problem, saying there will be a tax rate of 28% and tax will be on the entire receipts. Whenever online gaming receive any amount, they will tax the entire receipts. Those issues, what I understand is the industry was not, they were pushing on that, but they were more curious about past demands, because past demand is more than 1 lakh crores. And that decision has not been taken by GST Council in this meeting. It looks like that they have deferred it for future. But if I look at the overall scenario, these companies have a good case for the past. But
Okay.
a relief from a government would have need to put an end to the dispute which is there in the courts. That's what they were looking at. Second, I feel is
with respect to retrospective taxes that they have to pay or they were made to pay, perhaps there could be some sort of relief there, whether they will have to pay retrospective tax or whether the 28% GST levy will start from 1st of October 2023 onward.
That's right. Because the past period, the issue is already before Supreme Court, so Supreme Court has to decide on that. But for the period October 23, there has been no relief whatsoever. It's looked like that. The reason could be because there is a huge jump in the revenue. Let's be very clear. This, in fact, if the reports from Ministry of Finance has to be relied upon, there is an increase of 6-time revenue increase only from online gaming sector, which means a very, very big jump in revenue because of this amendment. Some of the states have made a observation that they can still survive. There is no problem whatsoever, which is not correct. Few states have made that statement, because definitely this increase in tax rate will definitely impact these industries. But they are more worried for the past then for the future, which they still feel they can tackle it in some way or the other. But as on date, for the past, no relief. For future, no discussion whatsoever. That's
All right.
on-
All right. Another big thing that will come out of perhaps GST Council meeting. Let me quickly get in Ritesh Kanodia, partner Aurtus Legal, joining us on the show. Ritesh, one of the big things that one is expecting, of course, whether there is going to be some sort of relief on health and life insurance premium. There is an understanding here that there was a broad consensus in the meeting that yes, there should be some relief, but it looks like this matter has been deferred to the next meeting. Are you expecting something big when it comes to life and health insurance premium, given that there's been a lot of conversation in the past couple of weeks?
Yeah, Shweta, the fact that they have already arrived at some broad consensus, which clearly means that they would want to rationalize the rates. Now, whether they go to 12% or 5%, or let's say whether they exempt it only for senior citizens, or let's say whether they keep group policies out, etc., are, I think, the modalities which have been left out to be discussed.
Okay,
So we will
so
do
let's
see
discuss
rate
those
rationalization.
modalities in your assessment. Should it be, because I think there is a broad consensus here that an exemption would be too much of a burden on government's pockets. So perhaps we could look at some sort of tinkering, some exemption for some certain individuals, like you rightly mentioned, senior citizens. What is your expectation?
So my view is that exemption is never advisable because it blocks your entire credit flow. So rather than giving an exemption, it would always be advantageous to reduce the rate. Right now, let's say if they do it for senior citizens, effectively means that insurance companies would have to reverse credits. So while the rate may not go up to effective rate may not go up to 18, it may go up to some tax rate. So it is never completely exempt. So yes, you are right that because this issue has become sort of a social cause issue, right? So they would have to tackle it in some form or manner, and maybe the way to do it is to say that senior citizens are out, individuals are out, and maybe the group of insurance policies are covered because those are taken by corporates who can bear the burden of tax. So that is what I think the modalities are going to be. They are not going to let go of the revenue easily. So I'm pretty sure. So I was just reading somewhere that the revenue on GST is around 1400 crores odd. It's a big number.
Absolutely. Shivam, do you agree with that? The modalities will, of course, we'll know them in a while from now, perhaps 5 to 10 minutes from now, when Finance Minister finally comes out and tells us what has been, what has come out of that GST Council meeting. But what is your expectation as far as that insurance premium is concerned? It's an emotive issue. It affects every last man standing out there. In your assessment, do you think it makes more sense to have perhaps group policies covered, but let individuals and senior citizens be exempt?
No, I think what Ritesh was saying is in principle correct, but let's understand what is the problem here. The problem is that what at least the council, why they were not able to take a decision was that 75% of this revenue goes to the state. Now, states have to agree to give up the revenue, and the numbers are pretty large. In on health insurance alone, the GST collection in a year is 9,000 crores, which is a very big number. Now, one, to get these states on board is itself a huge task, which I feel council has taken a decision in principle to give some relief, which means states are on board. So that's a very positive move from the council and for the industry at large. So far as exemption is concerned, complete exemption, like he was pointing out, is correct. We should not have a complete exemption, but this is something wherein no ITC is admissible to the policy holders. These are individual policies we are talking about. So maybe senior citizens can be brought under a lower tax rate, let's say 5, and others maybe 12, or depending upon how this chain works. Or we can have 0 for senior citizens and for rest 5, because right now everything is taxed at 18%, which is a huge cost so far as the individual policyholders are concerned. We have seen in the budget no big relief so far as middleman is concerned. There was a lot of discussion in the last budget that common man, there was nothing for the common man. By giving some relief on insurance GST premium, we can really think of giving some support to the common man in terms of, because this is has now health insurance has become a necessity,
Okay.
like food, house insurance is also has become necessity. Every common man goes for a health insurance. 18% tax on it. was really not called for. It was a need to relook at it. Good that council has taken states on board. They have referred it to fitment committee. I have full hope that there will be an appropriate relief on this sector.
All right. And, another important topic of conversation and takeaway would be whether there will be some sort of tax rationalization, the rate rationalization, a conversation for which a GOM was formed. And we are now given to understand, based on sources, Shivam, that there is no clarity and there is no consensus on rationalization. So the current tax rates of 5%, 12%, 18% and 28% are likely to continue. Is that your expectation as well?
That's true. Only some relief has been given. I think Uttarakhand was one state which was pushing on giving a relief on helicopter services for pilgrimage, which was 18%. Because I think most of the pilgrimage are in that part of the country. They have reduced it from 18 to 5. That's one thing that they have done, because these helicopter services are also kind of used by everyone, almost everyone who is not able to they are not able to climb the hill and all. So that's one relief which Uttarakhand has pushed for, and I think that has been considered. Another which has been which there was a debate was on the FMCG sector, because there was always a confusion what will qualify as a namkeen and what will not qualify as a namkeen, and there was huge sugar notices given to almost every FMCG which were into making of snacks item which were not clearly namkeen, but still they were sold in the bakery along with namkeen. So that seems to be some discussion with the fitment committee and the GST council. If those reliefs are given, then apart from that, I don't see any relief whatsoever given so far as rate rationalization is concerned, bringing the rate to 15%, which was always a kind of discussion. Here, I like to point one thing, that today, last time also in many discussions I have pointed out, today the nation is in a position to afford it. So
Okay.
government should actually take those steps. Why I am saying is, if you look at the GST collection numbers, there is constant 10% increase vis-a-vis 2023 collections. If you look at collections of August 23 versus August 24, there is again a 10% increase in the GST collections. We are having an average GST collection of I think 175, 175 crores or something like that. So 1.75 lakhs crores. So it's a huge number which we are having it. Now, with this revenue collections, if government shows their big heart and look for rate rationalization, this is the time, or it will never be, because country is in the phase of growth. We are looking on Viksit Bharat and other things. This can be a big move from
Okay.
the government and the industry at large, what the industry is looking at. And of course, let's don't forget, these GST rate reductions are going to ultimately impact the common man. Again,
Absolutely.
going back to
No doubt
what
about that, Shivam. No doubt about that. Let me come to you. Another important conversation, and which came by the way of Uttarakhand Finance Minister Ritesh, was that there's not been any decision taken with regards to taxation on small digital transactions. So the proposal to implement 18% GST on payment aggregators for transactions below 2,000, that proposal has been sent to Fitment Committee. What sort of impact are we looking as a result of this decision if it were to be implemented sooner?
So Shweta, the government's idea had always been to, keep credit card transactions per right. So all the UPI transactions are anyways out of the tax net. This is basically more to do with the larger discussion on digital coverage, where people use credit card, UPI as a method of payment rather than debit cards, rather than using cash. And transactions below 2000 were always exempt right from the service tax regime and even under GST. Now, if let's say that is brought in, obviously, which means that the transaction charges would become a bit costly, and end of the day, it would get passed on to the end user. So it would increase the transaction charges, which are already applicable, and therefore, yes, one thought would be that why would people then want to use credit card if because the 2% transaction charge, for example, is anyways a decent burden, right? So and an
Right.
18% on that would be a 2.36. So that really impacts the digital transactions. One more,
Okay.
just one facet I would like to highlight is that when you exempt anything, right, and this is about aggregators, they also have to reverse credit. So the net impact is always a bit higher. It's not entirely exempt. There is some tax burden. Yes, of course, 18% would be a much higher tax burden. So it's more to do with digital inclusion, and I don't, and I think that's the reason why they have sort of postponed it to the next meeting to have a larger discussion on this issue.
All right, and before I let you go, I'm run out of time, gentlemen. I think my final question is, as Shivam rightly pointed out, looks like GST collections are healthy. Government has enough and more money in its coffers to perhaps make way for, give more leverage to people, perhaps make it easier on their pockets to buy some of these goods and services. In your assessment, any further changes you're looking at apart from what has been announced so far and what we have got to know through sources? Any sort of tax change on any one certain product or service that could come by the way of 54th GST Council meeting? I'll start with you, Ritesh.
No, I think what everybody is also looking for is a couple of clarification on some of the most litigious issues that we've been seeing. And I think the crucial ones which I've been hearing is on intermediary services, where for advertisement agencies, there is a huge discussion on, whether advertisement agencies who render services to foreign principals are liable or not liable. And
Okay.
it's more to do with sort of the media cost. Another one very quickly is the road construction. So there were contradictory clarifications which were issued, and the industry was not paying tax on annuity received in lieu of toll charges because toll was always exempt. There was a U-turn in one of the council meeting to say that no, they are liable. So again, huge amounts of demand are outstanding on that, and the industry would want that to be clarified, at least for the past period. Going forward, yes, this consensus has been arrived at, and everybody's sort of paying that tax. But yes, for the past period, it would be important for the uh, government to sort of bring some clarification. Everything
All
is
right.
into litigation.
All right. And I just have under 1 minute. Shivam, to you. Any major changes that you're expecting?
So I think there are two things which I'm looking at is one, there were huge show cause notice demands which were made against institutes like IIT and other education institutions which were otherwise a government entity because of the technicality of the exemption notification which is there. They were receiving some grants from institutes, from association or government bodies like ICMR, etc., typically for the research purposes. Now, these notices has become a big issue for these education institutions because they were doing the activity which is more like a favor for the public at large. So they were
Absolutely.
getting grants from ICMR, DRDO, and so on and so forth. So there were show cause notices which is not only issued to IIT but other education institutions. They have also approached GST Council for relief on those notices. I think Council should look at it as in whether there is a need to give a clarification or an appropriate amendment in the exemption notification because these grants, it looks like when they introduced this exemption, these grants were not ever intended to be taxed, but because of the language of the notification, there has been show cause notice on these institutes. Second, I'm looking at again big numbers on foreign airlines, wherein notices have been slapped off around 10,000 crores, which have branches
Right.
in India. Now they are also hoping that something comes in their favor because
Okay.
that was never at all because of the technicality of the language of the provisions they have been slapped with the show cause notices. These are the two areas. So I think though we have been focusing too much of online gaming because that has been elephant in the room, these are the two areas which
Right.
also require some government intervention. I'm hoping that today council meeting was also able to deliberate on these points and some relief has been given.
All right,
That's
Shivam Mehta, Ritesh Kanodia, thank you very much for taking time out for joining us on the takeaways from what is expected out of the 54th GST Council meeting, which we are given to understand has just concluded. The chairperson of the meeting, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, will be chairing that press conference, will be starting very shortly, and we'll finally get to know what really transpired in the meeting and whether certain goods and services are going to be made cheaper or not. But with that, we have run out of time on the show. Thank you very much for watching.